Welcome to Godsplaining, Contemplative Preachers, Contemporary Age. Each week, join the Dominican friars as they consider all things Catholic.
Hello, and welcome back to Godsplaining. I should say, welcome to Guestsplaining, because here we are with an extra special guest. This is the one, the only, Mike Gormley, also known as Gomer. It is a pleasure to have you on our show, Gomer. Please say a word of welcome.
Oh, it is good to be here. Thank you all for inviting me on here. Father Gregory, I do want to remind you that I invited you to do a parish mission at my church and you stood me up. No hard feelings, but I selflessly come on your show. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine.
That's right. They say of friendships that they are non-reciprocal and benevolence has only to be one-sided. So I am happy to have this friendship with you.
Who says that?
But
who says that?
No
Who
one
says
does.
that?
I just made that up. That was for convenience sake. We're not alone here on this call. Those who watch on YouTube can verify that that is the case. Those who listen will not have known until this moment. We're also here with Father Jacob Bertrand. Father Jacob Bertrand, how are things?
I'm doing great. I was worried that you were going to forget to introduce me again, but you did it. So we're making strides. We're learning from our mistakes. It's great. So I can rest assured. Yeah, no, it's great. So yeah, good to be here. Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Gomer.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So usually we talk about mindless nonsense for the first 5 minutes of the episode because such is the manner of conversation. But we are here about the serious business of not wasting someone else's time. So we value your time and we thank you for sharing it with us. So to set up the topic for today's conversation, we want to talk a little bit about masculinity. And maybe people have all kinds of associations with it. So certainly people talk about masculinity. They might think it to be toxic in some settings. They might think it to be, I don't know, febrile is the word that I came up with, but I don't know that anyone else says that word except for me. Maybe wimpy in other settings. Yeah, it's just me. Okay, so we have a sense that men should be men, but that they shouldn't be brutes, nor should they be not men. So we have a sense of what we want, but then the question is, how do you make good men? So from your vantage, you preach parish missions, you're a lay evangelist, you have a media apostolate with Catching Foxes and with Every Knee Shall Bow. So you're thinking about forming disciples, and you're also a father. So you're forming little men, well, boys to be men. So maybe just to kind of get things going, what are your thoughts about kind of like men, masculinity in general? Do you have a working model in your mind? What are some things you're looking to form? What are some things you're looking to tease out?
Yeah, I think for our culture right now, we're in kind of a weird moment where Pope John Paul II and Christe Fides Laici brought out this notion of participation and how we're seeing for the first time in world history, groups that were excluded now participating in the public life of their countries, their people, their nations, whatever. And of course, he was speaking also in terms of the communist, totalitarian regimes that were occupying. But he brings up this whole point about female participation in society, to unheard of levels during and after World War II. And it's amazing because as women, especially through birth control, have been able to modify their lives in such a dramatic way, it's modified society in a dramatic way in ways that we never knew or could think about or anticipate. From things like if a man was that person who leaves the home in order to make a living for the home, and a woman was that person who raises the kids, what happens when both of them are out working? What happens when the woman makes more than the man, and so the man stays home? You end up the mutability or the mutable nature of these roles gets so dynamically switched when you throw birth control into it, like our society's been doing since the 60s. It really does. I don't think we fully appreciated the radical way it altered the human landscape and social landscape. So for men have always been in a weird place. I know that might sound weird, but right now men are targeted with patriarchy and all this stuff, with the domination over women. Obviously physical strength and violence has been a part of our society since the fall. But men have never been tied to their roles as women have been because of Mother Nature. We call it Mother Nature because women are initiated into womanhood naturally. men have always had, every culture except ours has always had initiation rites and rituals and procedures to say, now you're a man. And we haven't had that for the last 150 years for most Western modern societies. You know, Cardinal Sarab was talking about, you know, in his tribe in Africa, they march you into the men kidnap the boys, take them into the middle of the forest and circumcise them. And if they scream or cry, they're out of the tribe. Right. So could you imagine being a 12 or 13-year-old boy and all of a sudden, like, and then when you return, you're a man. You don't hang out with the women anymore. You hang out with the men until you're ready to, you know, make babies and such and so forth. But so for me as a man to navigate all these different waters, right, like you realize that the increase in female participation in the culture is a net benefit, great thing, but it destabilizes these roles that we've had for literally thousands of years. And I don't mean the woman's just barefoot and pregnant at home. What I mean is there was an understanding of the dichotomy of what it takes to build a household. And that understanding is completely gone. So you have the rise of toxic masculinity, which is not masculinity as such. You know, the idea of reducing my role as a man to just, you know, and I see this all the time with the young adults, especially college students, where they have no appreciation for relationships, just racking up sexual encounters. And you see this young adult. I would actually say that's more like post-college, because you have these people that just settle into grooves. I don't know what it's like in the OPs, but when I hang out with my fellow bros, right, we're a bunch of morons, and that's kind of what I need to be, because I have to be a fancy, sophisticated man at work and all these things. But the problem is when that's your only culture, right, when these men are not choosing to grow up beyond that, it can have a very toxic effect. And so what I find is you have these guys who consume porn at an unheard of level. You have other men who are doing that and then pursuing relationships with women in an unhealthy manner. And it just kind of compounds the efforts of trying to form an authentic Christian masculinity. And so again, I look at JP2. I mean, he was an adventurer, right? He was an outdoorsman. He was also an actor and a towering intellect, a deep man of spiritual life and prayer. And so I look to him more often than not in what it means to be a man and what it means to reflect that and reverberate that, right, out to the world. So it's super confusing, and you can't sugarcoat it. Like, everyone wants the typical answer, like, "Oh, be a man, you gotta be strong, you gotta punch a tree in half," right? And I am very little of those things. I used to always joke every time Franciscan University made me give a men's session at the youth conference. I'm like, crap, can't we get one of the guys from the band? Like, I don't know what it means. And we always joke that the men's sessions have evolved. When I went to the youth conferences in the 90s, it was like the oorah Braveheart, you know, raw, we're men, yeah. And then in the early 2000s, it was the it's okay to hug a brother, like sensitive guy talk. I don't know if Father Gregory, if you experienced that. And then it was for the love of God, stop looking at porn. And that's pretty much all it is now for the men's sessions. And so, and I find it, I mean, like, the guys who don't look at porn are such an anomaly right now. So the pornification of masculinity leads to hypersexuality and an inability to relate to women in a real level. So that's where I come in with my bedhead right here. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah,
there you go. That's awesome. Yeah, check it out on YouTube. There you go.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
So through what you just described, there are a number of, I mean, pornography, of course, relationship kind of things. If you were to sort of, before kind of diving into thinking about solutions, identifying the problem is always a good thing. Otherwise, you're proposing solutions for things that nobody cares about. But if you're, looking at the horizon and maybe in a broad social context, or even more specifically within a Christian Catholic context, if you had to sort of identify some problem areas where because of either the social changes or like the influence of pornography, where men suffer in these kind of ways, where they're kind of anemic in their sort of the masculine virtues, I guess, what would you kind of describe there?
Yeah, I think with the widespread confusion over masculine roles and the lack of initiation into adulthood, you have 40-year-old preteens, basically, right? And you're dealing with these men in adult bodies with adult careers who, when it comes to relationships, in a very real way, are childish. maybe not 40s, maybe 20s and 30s, but the onslaught of social media, and I know that it gets such like bugaboo, lip service. Everyone always criticizes that stuff, but when you put an always on distraction machine that's high definition and broadband in everyone's pocket, and then you tell them be mature, but you're giving it to a 6th grader, or in my daughter's case, in her preschool, a 6-year-old, you're giving a 6-year-old a brand new iPhone. Like how do you handle that when you're a little kid? I'll tell you how they handle it. They put their face to their phone all the time. Parents ask me all the time, what's one thing I can do for my high school students? And now I'm doing youth ministry on top of adult faith formation. And I tell them all the time, do not buy them a phone until they're 16 years old. And if they need a phone for text messages or whatever, then get them a dumb phone. Do not give them access to this stuff. It's impairing their ability to relate to humanity right in front of them, right? And so then you look at pornography. What does pornography do? The way I describe it is it lets you feel like a man without demanding anything of you, right? So if I had to pick one or the other, I would probably get rid of pornography if I could, snap my fingers and make it disappear, because it's always a mortal sin, right? Or it's always gravely sinful and disordered. But and I think you would have a night and day turnaround with pornography. But as it turns, for boys to become just adults and girls to become adult women, I think social media is impairing that so much. I think it's crippling our moral sense. And so when I work with people, that's the first thing I say is I do a lot of discipleship, right? So working one-on-one, working in small groups with people. And first and foremost is if we don't have an aim in society for men, and we don't posit anything for them, then there's nothing for them to strive for, right? And life becomes just one dang thing after another, right? And it ceases to be purposeful, meaningful, and because it's aimless. And so what I try to do is give them an aim. And this is where, the catechism and the Thomistic conception of the virtues is so absolutely paramount, and they are not getting this, right? Have you ever read the section on chastity in the catechism? I mean, you probably haven't because you don't need to, but people, no, I'm just kidding, but right. But that is one of my favorite places to teach people about the moral life in general, because it talks about like the laws of progress and the reality of failure. And I think so often we picture the moral life as like, you're on a mountaintop, now don't fall off, when in fact it's like, no, you're at the bottom of the mountain. You have ordered and disordered desires, feelings, urges, inclinations, whatever phrase you want, and you need to harness them through training. And I think if there's one word I could use to summarize what could help masculinity the most, it would be train, right? That notion of training. I saw a woman with a t-shirt in a gym parking lot. I wasn't going to the gym. I was going to the donut shop next door, but she came out and she said, and her shirt said, don't exercise. And then in big letters, it said train. And I thought like, oh, that is actually really profound. That is really profound, because it's like you have a stated purpose. I want to go to couch to 5K, or I want to run a marathon, or I want to deadlift X amount of weight. You have to adopt a rule, right? And the more I'm doing Exodus 90 right now, and the more I live as a layman under a rule, the more I realize the disciplines that come. The word discipline, right, means to teach. It doesn't mean to punish yourself because pleasure is evil, right? It means to teach, and you're teaching your passions, your desires, your emotions, your inclinations. You're teaching them, and you're learning more about yourself and where you fail. So doing Exodus 90, I realized, one of the things is I might give up TV, but I fall into other indulgences because I don't want to be a dad, because being a dad is exhausting. And so along that, don't just exercise, train. My advice to people is don't just say, I need to spend more time with my kids. Do a project, right? It has that same motif of like, you got to focus on a thing with a clear goal so that they see with you how they are making progress with you. And I think that's so huge. I really do.
Yeah, God bless you for Exodus 90. I did Exodus 90 the last year. I can't remember. 2 years ago, those cold showers. Holy cow. Not gonna.
Can I tell you the cold showers are my favorite part?
You're a sick man.
I am. It has, and we just got this crazy 2 winter storms here in Houston. And so the guys were all texting, we're like, should we roll back the cold showers? And I'm like, no. I stand in the shower. I don't do the arm, stand in, crank it on to cold full power. See the face of God, my friend. See the face of God.
You're singing them. I'm not, because the cold showers, they got the best of me. I tell you what, I was showering like once every 2 weeks because of that. That's not true, but kind of too close to the truth.
Yeah.
Let's stick with this idea of training. So it reminds me, I can't remember who it was or in what context, but someone asked my mom if my dad, predeceased her, if she would consider remarrying. And she said no, because it's taken too long to train him. So there's this sense that in relationships, be they, married relationships or friendships, that you're kind of training the other person, and you're not like making them a project. You're not saying like, I know what's good for you and I will bring it about as a result of very intentional and deliberate steps, which are kind of creepy and manipulative. But in like a friendship, you're trying to coax the good out of the other person, not because, again, you don't like them until such time as they're better, but because you love them, as a result of which, this relationship bears good fruit in their life. So I suspect, people listening, some may be married and some may have kids, but I think a lot are probably just involved in ordinary workaday friendships with men who probably disappoint them. Disappoint them because they are afraid to be committed. Disappoint them because they ghost them when it is convenient, when they find communication too demanding or burdensome. Disappointing because they are reticent to actually share on a deep level and choose instead to hold them off at arm's length. Disappointing in all the ways in which modern man is typically disappointing. So how do you encourage these people who want to coax the good out of the other, but want to do so in an organic way that will actually produce good fruit because it's, like animated by love? What do you say to these people?
The best thing you can do is to, so everyone wants to do in the Christian churches that I see, Catholic and Protestant and whatever, is they want to create small groups, right? And I'm a big fan of small group ministry. I created one. I see there's a lot of power in it. But I constantly see that men don't take to small groups very well. One guy said, I feel like I'm sitting in a knitting circle. And the reality is men don't use words as often as someone like me, right? Because I talk all the time nonstop. I'm like a shark. If I stop speaking, I just die, right? And if a shark stops swimming, it just dies. So the idea is, for most men, articulating their feelings and sharing their heart and all this stuff, that just sounds like, dear Lord, no, thank you. But so much about the faith is built around that at the parish level. Like, hey, we're going to come and we're going to have a men's meeting. We're going to do this. And we're going to share. There's teaching, there's discussion, and then there's like that personal sharing that sometimes I feel like gets emphasized too much. And so my remedy is to do things, right? So along the training stuff is to do things together, to not make it about, because I don't know about you, but for a lot of guys, their high school life consisted of sitting in a room, chugging beer, trying not to be awkward, right? And, sitting in a dorm room or going to a party, but what are you doing? You're talking with people, but you're drinking as that social lubricant, and you're trying not to replicate that in the churches, but that's often what people do. It's like, go sit in a small group, drink your punch, nothing in it, And so I find that men and women both need to do something rather than just talk about it. And when you're talking about training someone, I think that is hilarious what your mom said, because it is so true. And what I think of it is the subtle negotiation of other person's habits and hates, right? Like my wife hates dishes in the sink. So it has to become my habit to make sure that doesn't stay that way for a long time, right? And there are things that that if you care about the other, you're attentive as much as possible to their mode of being in the world, right? And their likes and dislikes. And so part of it is grafting yourself to them and they to you. And I think that's important. That is how we function in society. I have to be able to know your behaviors as somewhat predictable in order to be in the same room with you, right? I loved how I think, who was it? It was some presenter was on a stage, and he said, just imagine, he's like, all of you are just sitting down staring at me. Imagine if one of you turned in your seat and just started staring at the person behind you. How would you feel? And people, he's like, you don't even notice like these social conventions that we adopt immediately. But yeah, training one another in friendship, I think, is absolutely important. What was that line from C.S. Lewis when one of their friends in the Inklings died, and he said, "I'm not just going to miss so and so. I'm going to miss that aspect of J.R.R. Tolkien that only so and so could bring out." You know, and I think that's really important. Connecting over things with groups and not just individuals, I think is a key into reaching the masculine heart.
Boom. All right. In the middle or somewhere around the middle of each episode, we artificially take a break like we're a television show. So we're going to do that right now.
You are listening to Godsplaining. Visit us at godsplaining.org to listen to our episodes, shop our store, and donate to our podcast. All gifts go to improving the podcast and bringing the gospel to more listeners. Thanks for your support.
Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us on this here episode of Godsplaining. More specifically, Guestsplaining. We're joined here by Gomer, Mike Gormley, who is known for his exploits with Lay Evangelist, Every Knee Shall Bow, Catching Foxes, one of the first podcasts. I guess maybe to kind of speak to that. All right. So you got involved in podcasting like back in, the days when dinosaurs roamed the internet earth. Yeah. It's like you and Catholic Stuff You Should Know, and then a barren wasteland of non-media based Catholic ministry. In your experience of that, you've met a lot of people and you've formed a lot of relationships. What would you say, what is the place? So we're talking about forming men. What are the place of podcasts, internet apostle, things of that sort in forming these types of virtues or forming these types of relationships that we've described?
I'm a professional speaker. That's one of the things I do on top of working at a parish. And I tell people all the time when I'm at a conference or an event or a parish mission, I say, talking with me or coming to a talk is not going to bring transformation in your life. I'm just, hopefully, at best, I'm a catalyst. I can't walk with you. So the idea of the new media and the role of the new media and things, especially like podcasts and audiobooks and whatnot, the reason why they're so powerful today is because, and I got to be honest with y'all, the complete failure of communicating the Catholic faith at the parish level. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm no longer shocked at how little people know about being Catholic. I mean, it's shocking. 80% of a group of high school students had never heard of Cain and Abel, had never heard of the 10 Commandments, had never heard of Moses, right? And so I come from this place where I did the Bible timeline with Jeff Cavins when I was 14 years old with my dad. And I'm dealing with stuff like, people who have never heard of Cain and Abel, and these sound like silly children's stories when you read them for the first time. So podcasts fill in the gap in a very real way to the complete deformity of the Catholic heart in the culture. I mean, and thank God for them, but they're not enough. And they can feel like enough, but they're not enough. Interpersonal relationships are what we ultimately need, but they are it's like a visiting preacher, right? Like, hey, I'm going to go down, Father so-and-so's doing a 3-week mission. I'm going to go and listen every night to the talk. Well, that's good, but yeah, he might hear your confession too, but at the end of the day, he's not going to be there in 6 months when your marriage is upside down and you've gone back to drinking, right? Like, you need someone who journeys with you. Accompaniment. You need someone there with you. And if you don't have them with you, you're not capable of living the Christian life in a very real way. It becomes almost impossible to even keep the commandments, right? When you don't have someone with you in the journey, right?
So I guess when you say, well, I agree with all of what you said. And I think that's important. Dominican life has some community life to it. I think we gripe about it more than we do anything else, but it's still part of our life. So I'm with you. So what would you say, somebody who tunes into the podcast, ours, yours, or here's a parish mission, goes to like a big conference, something like that, guys who are looking for what you're describing, but what advice would you offer as far as beginning to build that? Because I think sometimes with this, the hardest thing is not keeping things going, but finding that community or being the one to build that community or that friendship or something. I think, and because of what you said, because of the whole social media thing, we lack those skills, I think, that were more natural in decades and generations past. So what do you kind of, for those listening, what would you say? Here are a couple of things that might be useful, helpful to try to kick off what you're describing.
Yeah, I heard of this men's group. It wasn't religious, but the first thing, you couldn't join the men's group until you've gotten the phone number, or until you've approached 50 separate women and asked for their phone number, right? So the idea was to be exposed to the horrible difficulty of being rejected, because you're probably going to be rejected by 48 of them, right? And especially if you look like me, like, whoa, cave troll. I did have a bit part in Lord of the Rings. I got shot in the mouth with an arrow. But the experience of it is I don't know any other way to say it than this. You have to, if you don't have community, get all the podcasts, do all the listening, watch all the fun, watch Braveheart on repeat. But at the end of the day, you need flesh and blood community. And if you don't have it, you need to start it. You have to be the one who ventures into the unknown and sacrifices all the uncomfortableness to take those first steps. I would recommend you go to the parish priest first, right? That's an excellent place to start. If you're in an area where maybe, I get people that say like, yeah, but I'm in a rural place and all this stuff. You're going to have your challenges, but you need community. You need it. You need community like you need water, right? What does it matter? What does Aristotle say? If you have all the riches and power of the, but you don't have friends, like if you don't have a single friend in which to share that with, like, what does it matter? And so you need community. So whether that is starting something, like I have friends who moved from college into our area and they had no one, right? And I'm an old married man. They don't want to party with me, even though I'll definitely party with them. I mean, I love it, right? I'm an extrovert. Where's the party? But they joined like rugby teams, and they don't know the guys, anything. And I think there is a distinction between and I heard this on a podcast called The Order of Man, where this guy said there's a difference between being good at being a man versus being a good man. And I think we want to, it's like sometimes I think we over spiritualize certain problems and we miss the very human, all too human component of like, I got to have good social skills. I got to work on that. And I got to learn how to look people in the eye, communicate with them clearly, invite them to events, make those events fun. Like you just have to do that. There's no thing, a podcast, like I love people. That's why I talk all the time to them. But my podcast can't hug you. my podcast cannot get a beer with you. So you need to have that in whatever way you can, especially post-COVID. Like we desperately need it.
Yeah, as I'm thinking about this, I listen to podcasts mostly when I go hiking. I live in Switzerland and I have opportunity to hike with some frequency. Let's do podcast on a phone and then just go up for X number of hours.
You're like,
and then
I get to hear this amazing world-class talk recorded from the kitchen.
Hey, things are improving, kind of. I listened to one the other day where it was a little rough, but they've gotten better. Please God.
Yeah.
Or thanks be to God. So sometimes, it's cold in the mountains, blah, blah, blah. iPhone batteries are built to break, and I'll like pull my phone out to check something and it'll just go dead. And I'll be like, that's all right. I brought a backup phone because my life is fueled by anxiety. And then that one goes out. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do here? Right. So it's an experience of solitude, right? It's the kind of, I guess, the negative impress or the relief of what you describe with community. So a podcast can't hug you. A podcast can't love you. A podcast is an opportunity to grow in some, habit or skill to think well or perhaps love better. But ultimately, it's about relationships. And I think that that focuses for me my need for a relationship with the Lord. Because if I'm uncomfortable being quiet, if I'm uncomfortable just being with the Lord, that reveals a kind of baseline discomfort in my own humanity. So maybe just as a kind of way to wrap up or final thoughts, maybe just to think a little bit about like, what is man before God, right? So all of this talk about engaging, all of this talk about forming community, meaningful relationships, growing in the requisite virtues to be of service, to be generous, to be good, right? But like, what does that look like in terms of a relationship with the Lord? Because I think a lot of the things that you described, which make it difficult for a man to talk about his life with other people, also makes it difficult for him to have a prayer life, to have a contemplative life. And you might find it to be like, I don't know, a little bit feminine. So what does that look like?
Yeah, it is so stupid when people think of the spiritual life as something feminine. But I do love how you were compelled as a contemplative to turn the conversation to how can I be alone? Whatever. No, I'm just kidding. You know how I get alone time as a married man? I go into the bathroom and I lock the door and I turn on all the air vents. So my kids, I just don't even hear them when they are screaming in terror. And, and they can't get to me because there's an exterior door that's also locked. And then I just read my Alistair McIntyre.
There's this little video from I saw it. I think someone sent it to me. It's a parent trying to do this, going into the bathroom, and then they have their phone and they're videotaping this, and under the door come these 5 little fingers, and they're just like, are you in there?
See, that's why you got to lock your bedroom door, the master bathroom door, and then I have a buffer toilet room door. Yeah. So I got 3 layers. They still find their way through. They still do.
Oh man.
But no, so when it comes to contemplation, if you follow the teachings of the master, right? Like if you're walking in the way of the Lord Jesus, the main thing you're going to see is every single time the crowds pressed in on him, he afterwards goes off into a lonely place, right? He goes alone. And that line from St. Francis, what a man is before God, that he is and nothing else. You need solitude. You absolutely need solitude. Pope John Paul II in his Theology of the Body, right? When he talks about why was Adam created first? And he talks about this notion of original solitude, to walk with God alone. Every man and woman needs to walk with God alone as the foundational core of who they are. From that foundation comes, so I always call it the first relationship. Your first relationship is with God and Christ alone, right? That needs to be nurtured and nourished overwhelmingly. And then from that spring, from that life-giving water, then it pours over into your relationships with others, especially if you have a vocation of matrimony or whatnot, your children. But the art of contemplation is being devastated by easy access to perpetual distraction. I mean, think about it. When you have Netflix, it automatically serves up the next show. So you have to intervene to not keep watching TV, right? Like that's the new thing. And Facebook automatically starts playing it. That's why there's all this push for closed captioning. It's not because they care about the deaf. It's because they want to see you look at the words on the screen moving to draw your eyes. And you'll start reading and be like, oh yeah, I want to watch this video. And it counts as a play. And so there's going hiking is one of the most important things you can do. And it really is. I'm doing a retreat for my parish staff. And one of the things is you have to care about your personal, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual health. And part of that is man being alone with nature, right? Just going outside is enough nature for most people. There's a reason why your stress levels decrease and why you do feel a greater connection to the universe, because you're a creature, right? You are made what was the phrase, right? God formed man from the dust, from the wilderness, and then plopped him into the garden. Like we need a little bit of wilderness from time to time to feel and to be reminded of our creatureliness. And if you don't know how to pray using mental prayer, that's the next step. Read that part on the catechism. Read meditative prayer. Don't read contemplative prayer because that just confuses everyone. My Exodus 90 group of guys are like, what is it's like looking at stuff constantly? Like, I don't understand. And I was like, oh, Father Jean Corbon, he is wonderful. But the part on mental prayer, meditation, right? Like helping people just read the life of Christ, a Lectio Continua over and over again of the Gospels. Is a masterclass on how to be alone, how to walk with God. Noah, right? The whole world is walking in a noisy crowd to destruction, yet Noah walked alone with God, and thus he was righteous and blameless in his generation. If you can't walk alone with God, then you really ought not to be walking with others, right? So it's integral to what it means to be a man.
Yeah, I think often of something that Mother Teresa's biological mother told her when she left to join the Sisters of Loretto, something to the effect of like, put your hand in his and follow him alone. And I think that, to end with that, kind of as a reflection on the discipline of masculinity, it means, to put your hand in his, who lived masculinity in perfect fashion, right? Who filled masculinity with the grace of the Most High God, who bore up our masculinity, as it were, into the heights of heaven. So yeah, that's a really beautiful meditation. So thanks Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks for everything. That's awesome. These are things that I will continue to think about, meditate on. I can't speak for Father Jacob Bertrand. He's probably got a few episodes of the latest Netflix show to watch. So
I'm just watching it on my computer right now while you guys are talking. So.
Distracted from distraction by distraction. I get it.
Yep. Bingo, little T.S. Eliot. Gomer, please tell people how they can kind of find more things that you're involved with on the internet and elsewhere.
That's a hard one. Layevangelist.com. I never update it. It's a website seen by dozens. I do a weekly podcast show called Catching Foxes. You can find that at catchingfoxes.fm and any service, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. Every Knee Shall Bow is for those who want to learn. It's a weekly show on how to evangelize. So if you want to do that as a Roman Catholic, we can hook you up. And other than that, I am not on social media, so don't bother. Don't bother. Burned all my accounts.
There it is. Okay, burn your accounts, but don't burn your bridges. Yeah. So from our end, let's see. Anything else? Father Jacob Bertrand's like, that's not a good tagline. You can't end an episode with that. All right. So I won't. Please do, let's see, like and share the podcast. Share it with folks whom you think would benefit from it. You could subtly send it to men whom you think need to grow up or whom you think are grown up, and you could tell them that either option may apply. So that way they don't know what you're doing. Please do like and share the podcast with your friends. And let's see, check things out on YouTube and then Patreon as a way by which to support, especially during the season of Lent, season of almsgiving, so that we can pay someone to edit our things and make the video quality better than it once was. Father Jacob Bertrand, what am I forgetting?
Check out our new merchandise. That's, I think, the last thing, right? That's it. You can get it from our website. You can get some pretty cool stickers. Hopefully they've been fixed. Thomas Aquinas' face and one of them looked like Two-Face because they cut out part of his face. So we're working on that. But check it out. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice. He actually looked like
you hit that
sorcerer.
Subscribe button and give us a like and make sure you hit that bell to be updated. Whoa, YouTube. You gotta be a cool YouTuber, guys.
He knows what's up. Yeah, you got to. Oh, absolutely. For our next YouTube channel, never mind. I had to stop. I'm going to rein it in. All right. So thanks so much for listening to this episode of Godsplaining. Thanks so much, Gomer, for joining us. And we will catch you next time. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Godsplaining, a work of the Dominican friars of the province of St. Joseph. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Leave a review on your podcast app. And visit us at godsplaining.org.